Andreas, I always ask a few questions at the end. I'm going to ask you those right now. If you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Andreas and give that young man a bit of advice based on everything you know now, personally, professionally, what would you tell him? And what was he like?
He was painfully shy, self-conscious, insecure, often scared, and quite traumatized from his childhood. So what I would say is it gets better, but most importantly, it gets different and in ways you can't even imagine. It gets weird, it gets strange, it changes in ways you couldn't even fathom. Nothing seems to connect. And to not fear so much. But of course, the 20-year-old wouldn't hear any of that. I mean, that's the problem with it, right? Is that I could even have lots of people telling me that, and until I had the life experiences to internalize those ideas, you know, even if I heard that phone call, I wouldn't act on it. I wouldn't be able to even understand it, right?
Yeah.
So, which I guess is why time travel doesn't exist.
Exactly. On that same note, best advice you ever received? Could have been from a parent or a co-worker or someone in the crypto space. Something come to mind?
I mean, a lot of it is very cliche advice, which is very easy to read and very difficult to act upon. You know, some of it's really simple, like treating other people with respect no matter who they are and never assuming. Very easy, simple, sure, great. Can you actually do it on a daily basis with everyone you meet? Absolutely not. Would you prejudge people and make snap judgments? All the time, right? And I've had some very, very amusing scenarios where I've made snap judgments and then they were completely wrong, or where I've treated someone with respect who, you know, everybody else was not paying attention to, and turns out that they should have been. Or with somebody says something and everybody else dismisses it, and I'm like, huh, and turns out nobody should have dismissed it. So it works both ways. And, you know, don't say things about other people in person, in private, in emails, or even to other people who you think are keeping your secrets, if you don't want those things to be read out loud in court or to your mother. If you would be embarrassed by those things being read out to your friends and family, you shouldn't be saying them in the first place. That's been very good advice, right? You know, because one, from a practical perspective, in the age we live in, they most likely will be, or worse, they'll be on Twitter. But more importantly, because it gives you a quick rule of thumb as to how to comport yourself and behave, if you always think about radical transparency of that form. Right?
That's good. That's good advice. Last part of that, to that 20-year-old that's watching, listening to us right now. Mm-hmm. Advice to them. I mean, they've heard a lot of ideas about privacy, about money being almost, you know, a mechanism of speech and of will, and of what we need to be worried about. Advice to them about things they can make, simple steps or ways to prepare themselves for the change, or prepare themselves for the world we live in now, to where they're not caught out, they're not in distress, they're not starving. What would you say?
None of the advice that I have to give is applicable to anyone else who doesn't have the same circumstances with me. And I think there's a very big mistake we make to look at people who have been successful, who have achieved things, and say, how did you get there? Tell us your secret. And their secret only applies if you had the same context when you were starting out and all of the probabilities lined up in the same way, which means none of it applies. Worse, a lot of the time we're perpetuating selection bias and survivor bias. They got there because, and you're talking to them because they happen to be the ones that succeeded. You don't get to talk to all of the ones who failed following the exact same advice. or trying the exact same shortcuts, but getting the timing wrong by 2 seconds or whatever. So I don't know that I can give advice like that, other than most people severely underestimate the power and range of capabilities and even the range of options they realistically have. So did I. That's something that comes with maturity, age, and luck. When I was in my 20s, I thought I could do a lot less than I could. I thought I had fewer options than I do. I have no choice, or I thought the number of choices I had was limited. It's infinite. And the power we have as individuals, both to endure things that we think are unimaginable and to succeed in ways that we think are impossible, is much greater. If young people knew how much power they have, the world would change very, very quickly. And you see it sometimes when an idea catches a lot of people, and you'll have a situation where all of the students in that country decide not to go to school the next day because they want reform of this particular circumstance in their life. And everybody's like, that will never work. And after 2 days, they're all like, oh dear. Right? That certainly did work.
Yeah.
Or simple examples like that, and it doesn't always work. But the point is, we have a lot of power, both as individuals, in the power of our words, the power of ideas, the power of our thoughts. And you don't have to have any money to have those things. But also the power of our choices and our principles and how we apply them in our lives and how those affect others around us. And if I knew how much I had earlier, I may have started even earlier with the things that I dare to do today that I wouldn't have dared as a 20-year-old. But at the same time, that's all good and well. But I'm the one who didn't die of malaria at 3 years old, right? I think all the time of the other Andreases. Like, think of the multiverse, right? How many of those branches are extinguished? Every choice I made, every random thing that happened to me that got me to where I am today, I find it fascinating about how many of those branches dead end. I didn't die at childbirth, neither did my mother. I didn't die of a preventable disease or dehydration by the age of 3. I didn't die of vaccination preventable diseases because I had access to those things. I didn't starve to death. I didn't get killed by a militia in my village, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many paths that end long before. And one of the things that I'm struck by as I get older is how random life is. My least favorite expression in the world is everything happens for a reason. And my true credo and worldview is everything happens for no fucking reason at all. We live in a universe of utter chaos in which the trajectory of a particle 20 light years away may change your life in ways you can't imagine in 20 years when it gets here, right? Or destroy your life completely. And it's like you're riding this canoe on white waters and you are firmly convinced that all of the paddling you're doing is really, really making a difference. It's making a tiny difference, but in truth, where you end up is up to the river, not you. and that is a terrifying idea, but it's also a very powerful idea, because if you stop worrying about all of the control you don't have, you can get on with the important job of paddling and enjoying the scenery that's rushing past.
Yeah.
But don't get too caught up in the idea that you have a plan, because the universe will laugh at that. So nothing happens for a reason.